Ancient Rome was built by more than just emperors and armies. We are stepping into the worn sandals of a different kind of builder, a Roman Mosaic artist. You will gain a complete understanding of the life behind these timeless floors, from the gritty reality of the workshop to the silent stories embedded in the stone. What hidden messages did these artists leave for us to find, and what did it truly cost to create a masterpiece meant to last 1,000 years? If you could have one scene from history laid forever at your feet, what would it be? The workshop floor is a world of dust and discipline. For a new apprentice, that first morning is a shock of noise and order. You stand at the absolute bottom of a clear and unyielding hierarchy. At the top is the pictor, the master artist and designer, whose vision dictates every cut of stone. Beneath him are the skilled artisans, the ones who translate his detailed sketches into reality with swift, precise hand. And then there is you. Your life now belongs to the foundational grit of the craft. Your hands will not touch a finished panel for years. Your first tools are not the fine hammer and hardy for cutting, but a heavy mortar stone and a grinding slab. Your world becomes the endless, rhythmic task of crushing colored minerals into fine pigment powders, your lungs filling with ochre dust or the faint metallic tang of ground malachite green. You learn the weight and texture of materials by sorting countless tesserae, the small cubes of stone and glass, into trays by hue and shade. A master can glance at a pile and see a spectrum. You must learn to feel the difference between a dozen types of red marble under your thumb. The air is thick with the scent of wet lime plaster and the constant percussion of chisels striking stone. Conversation is sparse, commands are sharp. Every movement has purpose, and wasted material is a sin. This is not a school, it is a proving ground. Your apprenticeship is a slow absorption, a daily baptism in the physical language of Mosaic, where you earn the right to one day place a single tile and then another into a story meant to outlive you. That dust you breathe holds the entire Roman world. Your palette as a Mosaic artist is not paint, but geography and empire. The most common tesserae come from local stone, the humble limestone and travertine quarried from the hills around Rome itself, providing the whites, creams, and grays that form the background of the world. But a masterpiece demands more. You learn to recognize the deep reds and purples of marble from Egypt, the brilliant green verd antico from Greece, the yellow giallo antico from Tunisia. Each color is a story of trade routes, loaded onto ships that cross the Mediterranean, their value measured in the labor of their journey. Then there is the magic, the smalti. These are tesserae made not of stone, but of glass, produced in specialized furnaces, often in cities like Alexandria. This material offers colors stone never could. It is here that the true alchemy happens. To create the famous Egyptian blue, craftsmen would fuse copper with silica and calcium, producing a vibrant, lasting hue that seemed to hold light within it. But the most legendary material is reserved for the divine. For the robes of an emperor or the halo of a god, you might be entrusted with a tessera of gold. This is not paint, but a miniature sandwich of pure gold leaf fused between two layers of clear glass, each cube a sliver of captured sunlight, worth more than you could earn in a year. Cutting these precious materials is an art of controlled violence. You graduate from grinding pigment to holding the hammer and hardy. The hardy is a stout, upright chisel fixed into a block of wood. You place a rough piece of colored marble or a slab of glass against its blade. With a precise tap from your hammer, you cleave a small cube, a tesserae. The goal is consistency, but each piece is slightly unique, its edges catching the light differently. This is the secret of the Mosaic shimmer, a field of 1,000 tiny individual mirrors. The colors themselves speak a silent language. That rare, vibrant purple came from thousands of Murex sea snails, a color so expensive it was legally restricted to imperial use. White could symbolize purity or mourning, red evoked vitality and blood, blue the heavens and the divine. You are not just laying stones, you are assembling a coded message in a language of color, each tiny piece of word in a story written for the floor. Your mastery of these materials means nothing without a patron. One morning, the workshop falls into a tense, expectant silence. The pictor, your master, is summoned to the atrium of a grand townhouse. A commission has arrived. This is not merely an order, it is the lifeblood of the workshop, and with it comes a new master, the one who pays. Perhaps it is a wealthy merchant, newly elevated, desperate to prove his cultural worth with a lavish floor for his triclinium, his dining room. Or it could be a senator, seeking a grand mythological scene for the summer villa he is building on the coast. You watch as your master prepares, not with his tools, but with his words and his demeanor. He must be part artist, part diplomat, and part psychologist. The meeting is a delicate dance. The patron has wants, often vague and grand. They speak of themes, of impressions. They want a scene of Bacchus, the god of wine, for their dining room, to suggest conviviality and abundance, or they request a complex geometric labyrinth pattern, a symbol of protection and order for their entrance hall. Sometimes, it is a portrait of themselves or their family, a demand for immortality in stone. Your master listens, nods, and begins the subtle work of guiding ambition into the possible. He must translate desire into a design that can be executed with the materials available, within the budget agreed, and on the unforgiving grid of the tesserae. He cannot paint soft shadows and blended hues. He must think in stark contrasts and clear lines. The agreement is struck, often sealed with a contract, and a substantial portion of the fee paid upfront. This money will purchase the exotic marbles, the Egyptian glass, perhaps even a few precious gold tesserae. Back in the workshop, the real translation begins. First, your master creates a small-scale sketch, a cartoon, on a wax tablet or a piece of wood. This is the soul of the Mosaic. Once approved, the design must be scaled up to the actual size of the floor. For simpler geometric work, this might be done with strings and chalk lines directly on the prepared bed of mortar. But for a complex figure, a portrait, or a battle scene, a full-size drawing is made on large sheets of parchment or linen. This drawing is the map every artisan will follow. It is laid over the fresh mortar, and its lines are carefully traced through, imprinting the guide onto the setting bed before the parchment is removed. In that moment, the patron's fleeting wish and the artist's vision become a physical blueprint, a ghost image waiting to be filled with the hard, lasting truth of stone. Your role now shifts. You are no longer just sorting colors. You are fetching specific trays for the artisans as they begin, following the trace lines, to make the ghost solid one tiny, permanent piece at a time. The pressure is immense. A mistake in the setting bed is a disaster. A misinterpretation of the cartoon could anger the patron and ruin the workshop's reputation. Every cut of the hardy, every placement of a tesserae, is now in service of a contract, a balance of art, commerce, and the ego of someone who believes their story deserves to be walked upon for centuries. The ghost image on that parchment is useless without a floor to hold it. Before a single tesserae is placed, you face the most critical and backbreaking labor of all, building the canvas itself. This is not a simple slab of concrete. It is a layered masterpiece of Roman engineering designed for one purpose, to last forever. The process begins with the statumen, a deep foundation of fist-sized rubble and broken bricks, carefully packed into the excavated earth. This layer acts like a giant sponge, managing groundwater and preventing the freeze-thaw cycles of winter from heaving the floor from below. It is brute strength, the unseen bones of the Mosaic. Upon this, you pour the rudis, a thick bed of coarse concrete. This mix is a rough recipe of lime, sand, and more crushed brick or pottery, known as terracotta aggregate. The lime, slaked from burning limestone, is the magical binder. Mixed with water, it begins a slow chemical marriage with the sand and aggregate, a process that will continue hardening for decades. The rudis is your stability, often 6 inches thick or more, troweled roughly level, but the true artistry of the foundation comes with the final layer, the nucleus. This is the fine setting bed, the actual surface upon which the tesserae will be embedded. Its mixture is precise and delicate, a smoother blend of the finest lime, sand, and sometimes powdered marble dust. You mix it with water to a perfect, creamy consistency, neither too wet nor too dry. This is spread over the rudis in sections, because once it begins to set, the race against time begins. You have perhaps a single day, sometimes less. to work while this nucleus retains the ideal plasticity, firm enough to hold the weight of the stones, but soft enough to accept them. Using long wooden straight edges and levels, you and your fellow workers painstakingly scree this surface to a perfect, flawless plane. A dip of a fraction of an inch will distort the final image. A hidden crack from a poorly mixed batch will spiderweb through the masterpiece above years later. There is no glory in this work, only the immense pressure of knowing that every cut of colored stone, every hour of artistic labor to come, rests entirely upon the silent, perfect integrity of this gray, unadorned bed. The beauty is an illusion, a brilliant skin. The truth of the mosaic, its promise of eternity, is built first from rubble, then from coarse strength, and finally from this fine, deliberate dust waiting to hold a story. That perfect gray canvas of the nucleus now demands its first permanent mark. For the grandest floors, the work does not begin at the edge. Instead, the artists focus on the heart of the masterpiece, a technique known as the emblemata. This is the detailed central panel, the jewel of the composition, often a portrait of a god, a dramatic mythological scene, or an intricate still life. To achieve a level of detail impossible while kneeling on a hardening floor, the emblemata is crafted off-site, in the controlled environment of the workshop. A shallow wooden tray is prepared with a temporary bed of fine lime and sand. Upon this movable surface, the pictor and his most skilled artisans begin their most meticulous work. They use the smallest tesserae imaginable, some no larger than a grain of rice, cut from the finest marble and glass. These tiny cubes allow for subtle shading, the curve of a lip, the glint in an eye, the delicate fold of a robe. The work is excruciatingly slow, a meditation in stone. Each tessera is placed with tweezers, its angle carefully considered to catch the light in a specific way, building up the image dot by colored dot, like a painting made of solid pixels. This portable panel becomes a self-contained artwork. Once complete and fully cured, it is treated with immense care. The entire tray is transported to the villa or temple, where a perfectly sized recess has been left in the larger, coarse mosaic field. The emblemata is then lowered, like a priceless medallion, into its waiting socket and secured with fresh mortar. The surrounding floor is then built up to meet its edges, framing it. This method represents the absolute pinnacle of the Mosaicist's art, a fusion of painterly detail and enduring stone. It required not just skill, but profound patience, a willingness to spend weeks or months on a single square foot of imagery, knowing it would be the focal point that every eye would be drawn to, the story within the story, set forever into the floor. But the emblemata is only the jewel. The true scale of the project lies in the vast field that surrounds it. This is the realm of the opus tessellatum, the large-scale mosaic floor that covers entire rooms. Here, the work becomes a symphony of coordinated labor, a physical marathon measured in square feet and aching backs. The master pictor, having set the precious central panel, now takes up a different tool, a pointed metal stylus. Kneeling on the still damp nucleus, he begins to trace the full-scale cartoon directly into the mortar, scoring the outlines of major figures, the borders of geometric patterns, the flow of decorative vines. His lines are swift and confident, the blueprint becoming physical under his hand. This is the moment the design breathes, moving from parchment to the permanent skin of the floor. Once the guidelines are set, the crew moves in. This is not a solitary art, but a practiced assembly line of stone. The most senior artisans take the critical areas, the figures and detailed elements closest to the trace lines. They select tesserae with deliberate care, considering not just color but the angle of each cut, setting them slightly askew to catch the lamplight from the dining couches that will ring the room. Their work builds outward from the master's lines, defining a god's muscular leg or the curve of a ceremonial bowl. Meanwhile, you and the other apprentices and junior workers are tasked with filling the vast expanses of background and the repeating geometric borders. Your job is speed and consistency. You work from trays of pre-sorted, coarser tesserae, often local stone in solid colors like white, black, or red. For the background, you follow a simple rule: set each cube in neat, slightly curving rows that flow around the central figures, creating a uniform C that makes the detailed scenes pop forward. The geometric borders require a different kind of focus, a repetitive rhythm of triangles, meanders, or braided patterns that must remain perfectly even for the entire length of a wall. You work on your hands and knees, often for weeks, your world reduced to a square arm's reach in front of you, the smell of damp lime plaster, and the constant soft tap-tap-tap of your hammer adjusting a stone. You move backward across the floor as you work, from the center toward the walls, so you never disturb the fresh setting bed. The scale is humbling. A single villa triclinium could require tens of thousands of tesserae, each placed by hand. There is a profound physicality to this creation, a slow, deliberate conquest of empty space, one small, hard square at a time. You are not just making a picture, you are building a new surface for the world, a skin of stone that must be flawless, flat, and ready to endure a millennium of footstep. The collaboration is silent, intense, a wordless understanding between craftsmen where the only sounds are the scratch of the stylus, the clink of stone in trays, and the quiet sigh of a tessera pressed home into its bed of mortar, finding its permanent place in a grand, emerging pattern. The final tap of your hammer sets not just a stone, but a frozen moment of epic drama. Across countless Roman floors, the myths of gods and heroes were not merely illustrated, they were resurrected underfoot. In a villa in Pompeii, a master artist faced the ultimate narrative challenge, translating the vast, wandering epic of Homer's Odyssey into a single, powerful scene for a dining room floor. He chose not the journey, but the homecoming, the moment of vengeance and reckoning. The scene is the slaughter of the suitors. The composition is a masterpiece of controlled chaos. Odysseus stands at the center, his body a taut arc of tension, bow drawn, an arrow mid-flight. He is not painted with soft lines, but built from sharp, contrasting tesserae, his muscles defined by blocks of deep umber and ochre shadow. Around him, the arrogant suitors are caught in a frantic dance of death, their poses tumbling and disjointed, their fine robes rendered in chaotic splashes of color, now stained with symbolic red. The artist uses the very grit of the mosaic to create order within violence, the geometric lines of the room's architecture framing the bloody scene, containing it. This was far more than a decoration. For the Roman patron reclining on his couch, this floor was a complex cultural signal. It announces paideia, his Greek-style education. He can narrate the myth to his guests, identifying each character, discussing Homer's poetry, proving his refinement. It also served as a moral lesson, a reminder of loyalty, the wrath of the betrayed, and the ultimate restoration of order. The choice of myth was deeply personal, a reflection of the patron's own aspirations or fears. A scene of Hercules achieving one of his labors might adorn the floor of a general's home, a parallel to military perseverance. A depiction of Dionysus, god of wine and theater, was perfect for a dining room, promising conviviality and escape. These floors were conversation starters, theological statements, and personal billboards all in one. They transformed the act of walking through a home into a walk through a sacred story, a daily reminder that the divine and the heroic were not distant legends, but narratives woven directly into the fabric of daily life, a step away. But capturing a god was one thing, capturing a living, breathing man, especially one with absolute power, was an entirely different kind of alchemy. Portraiture in Mosaic was the ultimate test of an artist's skill and nerve. You are no longer working with the idealized features of Hercules or the familiar mask of Bacchus. You must now translate the very specific, often imperfect, human face of your patron into the unforgiving grid of stone and glass. The challenge is immense. Skin is not a flat color. It is a living map of subtle shadows, warm highlights, and faint blushes. To achieve this with solid cubes, you must become a master of optical mixing. You cannot blend, you must suggest. A cheekbone is not a line, but a careful transition from a field of pale cream tesserae to a strategic scattering of tiny, slightly darker gray or ochre cubes that from a few steps away, the eye fuses into a soft shadow. The curve of a lip might require 5 different shades of red and pink marble, each tessera placed at a minute angle to catch the light and suggest fullness. The eyes are the most critical. A single misplaced dark stone can make a gaze look vacant or cruel. Instead, you use a complex arrangement, a central black tessera for the pupil, surrounded by a ring of deep brown or green, then flecked with tiny chips of gold, glass, or pale stone to create the illusion of a wet, reflective spark of light. This was not vanity, it was a high-stakes political act. If your patron was a local official, the portrait was a statement of his dignity and permanence in the community. But if the commission was for an imperial image, the pressure was absolute. Your workshop might be tasked with creating a portrait of the emperor for the floor of a provincial basilica or a governor's palace. There was no room for artistic interpretation. You worked from an official likeness, perhaps a coin or a small bust sent from Rome, and you had to replicate it with reverent accuracy. Getting the likeness wrong was not an artistic failure, it was a potential insult. A nose rendered too large, a jaw not strong enough, could be seen as disrespectful, a dangerous misrepresentation of the imperial person. The portrait had to convey the emperor's auctoritas, his authority, and his virtus, his manly virtue, through the arrangement of hard stone. It had to be recognizable, idealizing just enough to appear godlike, but human enough to be believed. We see this ambition realized in works like the famous Alexander Mosaic from Pompeii, a Roman copy of a much older Greek painting. Though it depicts Alexander the Great, its creation in a Roman context shows what the art form could achieve. The face of Alexander is a Mosaic masterpiece, a whirlwind of emotion and realism built from thousands of minute tesserae. His brow is furrowed with concentration and battle lust, his eyes wide and fixed on his enemy, his hair a dynamic cascade of individual blonde and brown stones. It is a face that tells a story of youth, power, and divine favor, all rendered in silent, permanent stone. To stand before such a portrait was to feel the subject's presence, their power embedded directly into the architecture of the space. The floor did not just hold you up, it looked back at you, with the unblinking gaze of someone who believed they and their story were meant to last forever. Beyond the gods and the faces of men, a whole other world thrived under Roman feet, a silent menagerie captured in stone. Animals, both real and mythical, were among the most beloved and recurring subjects in the Mosaic repertoire, each creature placed with symbolic intent and keen observation. For the grand entrance of a villa, a patron might request a pair of fierce lions, rendered in bold shades of ochre and umber, their powerful bodies coiled and watchful. These were not just decorations, they were guardians. The lion, a symbol of strength, royalty, and protection, served as a potent warning and a statement of status to any visitor crossing the threshold. The mosaicist would study the animal's anatomy, perhaps from sketches made at the games or from a pattern book, emphasizing the heavy mane with deep brown tesserae and using sharp, contrasting black stones to outline a fierce, watchful eye. The goal was to capture not just the form, but the essence of formidable power, making the doorway itself feel alive with a protective presence. Step into a garden dining room, however, and the mood shifts entirely. Here, the floor might come alive with a delicate aviary. Against a crisp white background, you would craft a scattering of small, colorful birds, each species identifiable by its shape and plumage. A bright red bullfinch pecks at a rendered berry, its chest a careful gradient of tiny crimson and pink glass cubes. A sleek magpie, defined by stark black and white tesserae, seems to tilt its head curiously. These scenes were celebrations of domestic peace and the cultivated beauty of the hortus, the garden. They invited diners to relax, to enjoy the harmony of nature, even as they reclined indoors. The artist's skill here was in miniature and suggestion, using the smallest cut stones to imply the lightness of a feather, the quick turn of a head, the delicate grip of a claw on a stylized branch. Perhaps the most fitting union of subject and space was found in the bathhouse. In the steamy, echoing halls of the caldarium or the frigidarium, the floors often transformed into a vibrant seascape. Here, the mosaicist could unleash a riot of color and fluid motion. He would set twisting octopuses with sucker-covered arms rendered in swirling patterns of purple and red stone, their bodies seeming to undulate across the wet floor. Dolphins, symbols of good fortune and playful guides for sailors, would leap in graceful arcs, their bodies a sleek gray made from carefully selected marble. Fierce moray eels would peek from rocky outcrops built from rough chunks of dark stone. This aquatic paradise was pure sensory theater. For the bather, stepping onto such a floor was an immersion within an immersion, a playful blurring of the line between the man-made pool and the boundless ocean it mimicked. It was a testament to the artist's ability to observe not just animals, but their very element, translating the fluid, weightless world of water into the fixed, solid medium of stone and mortar. This accuracy did not come from imagination alone. Mosaic artists were sharp observers of the natural world. They studied local wildlife, sketching birds in the garden or noting the way a cat moved in the sun. But for exotic creatures like lions, tigers, or the mythical beasts they were also called to render, they relied heavily on pattern books. These were collections of drawings, often copied and recopied over generations, that served as a visual library. A book might have a standard page for a griffin with its eagle's head and lion's body, or a canonical pose for a grazing deer. The artist would adapt these patterns, scaling them up, adjusting the colors to fit the available materials, and perhaps adding a personal touch in the flow of a tail or the glint in an eye. This blend of borrowed tradition and first-hand observation gave these animal mosaics their enduring life. They were more than just pictures, they were a language. A lion meant protection, a dolphin meant safe travels, a peacock, with its 100-eyed tail feathers, symbolized immortality and the all-seeing heavens. Every creature underfoot was a word in a silent sentence about the home, its owner's values, and the delicate, beautiful, and sometimes dangerous balance of the natural world they sought to bring inside and walk upon forever. Yet the human face and the mythic beast share the floor with another, equally demanding language, one of pure line and calculated angle. While figurative scenes told stories of gods and heroes, the vast fields of geometric mosaics spoke a quieter, more profound truth about the Roman mind. These were not mere filler or simple decoration. They were demonstrations of intellectual mastery, a marriage of artistic vision and mathematical precision that transformed a floor into a contemplative puzzle. To walk across a geometric mosaic was to traverse a map of cosmic order, a belief that beauty itself was rooted in perfect, knowable ratios. The creation of these patterns began not with a sketch of a figure, but with a grid of strings and the steady turn of a compass. The mosaicist would first establish the room's central axis with a chalk line. From this spine, they would use a simple cord, stretched taut and dipped in pigment, to snap perfectly straight guidelines across the prepared mortar bed, creating a network of intersecting squares or diamonds. This invisible scaffolding was the skeleton upon which all complexity would be built. For a pattern like the meander, also known as the Greek key, the artist would plot a continuous, right-angled path that folded back upon itself infinitely, a symbol of eternity and unity. Each turn, each square, had to align perfectly with the grid, a single misaligned tesserae breaking the hypnotic flow. More complex was the guilloche, an intricate braid of interwoven bands that seemed to weave over and under itself in an endless, rhythmic dance. To plot this, the artist relied heavily on the compass, drawing a series of perfect, overlapping circles. The intersections of these circles created the precise points where the braided bands would cross, a geometric secret hidden beneath the final layer of colored stone. This was art as algorithm, a visual equation solved in lime and marble. But the true show of technical prowess came in the creation of illusion. Using nothing but flat, square tesserae in contrasting colors, masters could make a floor appear to bulge, recede, or transform into a three-dimensional labyrinth. One of the most famous effects was the opus sectile style illusion, where the arrangement of triangles and squares of colored marble created the convincing image of cubes stacked in a perspective grid. By carefully controlling the value, placing light stones next to dark in a repeating sequence, the artist tricked the eye into seeing depth where there was only flat surface. This was more than a clever trick, it was a philosophical statement. It demonstrated control over perception itself, proving that the artist could manipulate reality on his own terms, creating order from chaos and solid form from flat plane. These geometric floors, often gracing the grand public spaces of basilicas or the long hallways of bath complexes, served a dual purpose. Their repetitive, orderly nature was calming, guiding the eye and the foot along a predetermined path. But for the educated viewer, They were also a silent conversation about the nature of the universe. The perfect symmetry echoed the harmony of the spheres, the infinite repeat spoke of timelessness, and the optical illusions play with the very boundaries of the seen and the unseen. In a world filled with the unpredictable chaos of politics, weather, and fortune, the geometric mosaic was a promise. It asserted that beneath the surface of life, there was a framework of perfect, intelligible beauty, laid stone by stone, angle by angle, by a craftsman who understood the geometry of the divine. This geometric order concealed a world of fiercely guarded secrets. Within the close walls of the workshop, knowledge was a form of currency, and the most valuable coin was technique. Every pictor and his team possessed a trove of proprietary methods, passed from master to trusted apprentice, never written down. The most fundamental secret was the mortar recipe itself. While the basic ingredients of lime, sand, and aggregate were common, the exact proportions, the source of the sand, the type of crushed brick, even the temperature and timing of the slaking process for the lime, were all variables meticulously controlled. A master's mortar might set more slowly, giving his artisans precious extra hours to work a complex section. Another's might cure to an exceptional hardness, ensuring his floors would not wear down for centuries. This was alchemy disguised as masonry, and the formula was a workshop's crown jewel. Equally protected were the methods for achieving visual effects, the pinnacle being the opus vermiculatum, or the worm-like work. This was not a style of mosaic, but a technique within it, used for the most detailed areas like faces, fabrics, and the delicate emblema panels. Instead of setting tesserae in neat, roughly parallel rows, the artist would arrange the tiny cubes in flowing, curving lines that followed the contour of the shape they were defining. To shade the curve of a neck, the stones would be laid in a gentle arc, like the rings of a tree. To show the flow of drapery, they would swirl like water around a rock. This technique allowed for a softness and a realism that blocky rows never could, making the figures seem to breathe. It was incredibly time-consuming, requiring the smallest tesserae and immense patience, and it was a hallmark of a top-tier workshop. Because of this specialized knowledge, workshops developed recognizable signatures, a kind of artistic handwriting in stone. A workshop based in Ostia, the port of Rome, might have a reputation for vibrant marine scenes with particularly fluid opus vermiculatum in the fish scales. Another, patronized by the imperial family, might be known for a specific way of rendering imperial purple or cutting gold glass for halos. Connoisseurs and wealthy patrons would seek out these workshops by name, creating a competitive, secretive market. In this world, the artist's individual identity was usually swallowed by the collective output of the shop, which is why the rare, poignant exceptions are so powerful. On a handful of floors across the empire, amidst the grand depictions of gods and heroes, a simple, humble word appears, tucked into a corner or along a border. The word is fecit, Latin for made this. It is not a boastful signature, not a created by or designed by. It is a quiet, profound statement of fact. Made this, behind that word is a lifetime of dust, aching knees, and mastered secrets. It is the moment the anonymous craftsman steps out from the shadow of the patron and the workshop, and for a fleeting instant, claims ownership of his skill. He does not sign the design, he signs the labor, the countless tiny decisions of hand and eye that transformed a patron's wish into enduring stone. That single word, fecit, is a whisper across the centuries, a crack in the anonymity, reminding us that these floors were not made by Rome, but by Romans, one careful, secret-laden tile at a time. The word fess, it was earned not in a moment of inspiration, but through a lifetime of days that all began the same way. Dawn was not a poetic event, it was a practical necessity. You awoke in your small shared room near the workshop, the chill of the stone floor seeping through your thin sandals. The first light was the most valuable tool you had, pure and clear, revealing the true colors of your tesserae without the deceptive glow of oil lamps. By the time the sun fully cleared the rooftops, you were already on your knees, your section of the nucleus damp and ready, the traced lines of the day's work waiting. The morning hours were for precision, for the detailed work on a face or a complex border. When your eyes were fresh and your hands steady, the only sounds were the distant cries of the city waking, the shuffle of feet as trays of stone were brought in, and the soft, percussive rhythm of a dozen hammers tapping stone against iron. Your world shrank to the square yard in front of you, a puzzle of color and line you had to solve before the mortar set. The dust was a constant companion, a fine, colored powder that coated your tunic, lined the creases of your hands, and filled the air with the scent of crushed earth. You learned to breathe shallowly, but by midday, your throat was always dry and gritty. The sun climbed, and the light in the room shifted, becoming harsher, flattening the shadows. This was when the physical reality of the craft settled into your bones. Your back ached from the hunched posture, a dull, persistent throb between your shoulders. Your knees, even with a scrap of padded cloth beneath them, grew sore and stiff from the unyielding floor. Your hands, once soft, were now a landscape of calluses, rough pads on your fingertips from sorting sharp stone, a hardened spot on your palm from the constant grip of the hammer. The heat of the day baked the moisture from the mortar, and you worked with a growing urgency, knowing your window for perfect placement was closing. When the sun stood directly overhead, the signal came, work stopped. You straightened with a chorus of soft groans, joints protesting. Lunch was a simple, shared affair. You gathered with the other workers in a shaded corner of the courtyard, washing the dust from your hands and face in a basin of cool water. The meal was humble but vital: coarse bread, a handful of olives, a piece of cheese, and a cup of watered wine to wash it down. This was not a time for elaborate conversation, but for quiet recovery, a sharing of bread and mutual exhaustion. For a half hour, you were not a Mosaicist. You were just a man, feeling the sun on your face, the ache in your muscles, the simple pleasure of rest. The afternoon was a different kind of endurance. The light was long and golden, excellent for judging the overall composition, but your body was fatigued. This was often the time for the less glamorous work, filling in large fields of background color, or setting the repetitive geometric patterns that required more stamina than artistry. The tap of your hammer became automatic, your movements practiced but slower. The satisfaction was different now, not in the creation of a delicate feature, but in the sheer conquest of space. You could look back over your shoulder and see the blank gray mortar steadily disappearing under a growing tide of ordered stone. A completed section, even a simple white background, was a tangible victory. As the sun began its descent, painting long, dramatic shadows across your work, the pace slowed to a final, careful push. You might spend the last hour adjusting a few misplaced tesserae, ensuring the lines were straight, cleaning excess mortar from the surface with a damp sponge. Finally, as dusk bled into the room, the master would give the word. Tools were cleaned and stored, the remaining mortar covered with damp cloths to keep it workable for tomorrow. You stood, your body a map of aches, and looked at what you had made. In the failing light, the mosaic seemed to gather the day's last glow, the colors deepening, the gold tesserae holding a final, fleeting spark. The dust still coated your skin, your back throbbed, and your hands were rough stone themselves. But in that quiet moment, there was a profound, silent exchange. You had given your body, one day of your life, to this patch of floor, and in return, it gave you permanence. That section you completed today would outlive you, outlive the patron, outlive the empire itself. The pain would fade by morning, but the stone would not. This was the true rhythm of the craft, a daily bargain between the fragile human body and the relentless, beautiful ambition of eternity, sealed one tiny, colored square at a time. That permanence, however, was always at the mercy of a living, breathing patron. The artistic process was not a sacred, untouchable ritual. It was a service industry, and the client's whims were the true, unpredictable weather of your work. You could have spent weeks on a detailed border, only for the patron to make a surprise visit, squint at your progress, and declare the pattern too busy. He might point to a rival's floor he saw at a dinner party and demand something similar, a completely different style that would require tearing up days of labor and starting fresh. The most common and frustrating demand was for speed. A patron planning a lavish banquet to celebrate a political appointment might suddenly move the date forward, insisting the dining room floor be finished in half the time. This meant longer hours, working by lamplight into the night, the quality of your setting bed suffering as you rushed the mortar, knowing full well the cracks would appear years later. But the most delicate dance was over color. A wealthy matron might insist the sea in her bathhouse mosaic be a specific shade of turquoise, a color that required a rare Egyptian glass you did not have in stock. Your master would have to explain, with practiced diplomacy, that the shipment from Alexandria would take 2 months, or that the cost would be triple. She might wave a hand, dismissing the expense, or she might petulantly settle for a cheaper, duller local stone, forever blaming the artist for the floor's failure to match the vision in her mind. The economic reality was a constant heavyweight the workshop had to eat. Refusing a patron, even a difficult one, could mean losing not just that commission, but your reputation in a tight-knit, gossipy community of the wealthy. So you learned to compromise. A patron's poorly drawn sketch for a family portrait had to be translated into something dignified and proportionate without offending his belief in his own artistic skill. A demand for a garish combination of colors had to be subtly adjusted, perhaps by balancing a loud red with more sophisticated earth tones, guiding the patron toward taste without him feeling corrected. It was a silent, daily lesson in psychology and survival. The true masterpiece was often not the mosaic on the floor, but the invisible one of patience and persuasion built in the conversations above it. You learned that the client was not just always right. They were the final, unpredictable ingredient in the mortar, their vanity, haste, or changing taste mixed right into the bed alongside the lime and sand, becoming a permanent, if invisible, part of the work's history. But beneath the grand myths and flattering portraits, a more honest, wryly smiling version of Roman life was also being laid in stone. In the quieter corners of homes and shops, mosaic artists often set aside the solemn gods and indulged in a playful, sometimes cheeky, observation of the world right outside their door. This was the art of the margins, where the human condition was depicted not with heroism, but with humor and humble truth. One of the most delightful and common themes was the world turned upside down, a visual joke meant to provoke a chuckle from guests. You might craft a scene of an ass, a donkey, solemnly attempting to play a lyre, an instrument of refined culture. The joke was multi-layered, poking fun at pretension, at the idea that anything could be elevated beyond its nature. It was a reminder not to take oneself too seriously, a piece of folk wisdom embedded in the floor of a dining room where political and social posturing were daily events. These comic inversions served as a pressure valve, a permitted moment of satire in a highly formalized society. Even more direct were the candid snapshots of daily commerce. In the entryway of a shop in Ostia, the port city, a mosaic might simply depict the goods sold within. A butcher's shop floor could feature a vivid, almost diagrammatic scene of different cuts of meat hanging from hooks, a leg of lamb, a side of beef, rendered in straightforward shades of red and white marble. It was both advertisement and art, a declaration of profession in an enduring medium. A tavern might have a floor showing a simple still life of a loaf of bread, a cup of wine, and a plate of olives, a silent menu for the illiterate. These were not grand statements, but honest ones. They connected the artwork directly to the rhythm of everyday life, to hunger, trade, and simple pleasure. Perhaps the most famous and personal of these glimpses is the Cave Canem mosaic from Pompeii. At the threshold of the house of the tragic poet, a fierce, chain-rending dog is rendered in bold black and white tesserae, captured mid-bark, teeth bared. The words Cave Canem are spelled out clearly beside him, beware of the dog. This was more than a warning sign, it was a character piece. The artist took care to show the dog's spotted coat, its tensed muscles, the alert curl of its tail. It has personality. It feels like a real animal that lived in that house, its protective spirit forever frozen at the door. This mosaic works on 2 levels. It is a functional security notice, and a display of the owner's wit and the artist's skill in capturing life, not just legend. In these works, the invisible wall between the ancient world and our own seems to thin. The desire to make people laugh, to advertise your business, to boast about your pet, these are profoundly human, timeless impulses. When the artist chose to spend his precious time and skill on a comic donkey or a barking dog, he was doing something revolutionary. He was stepping outside the demands of patron and prestige to document the texture of ordinary existence. In these mosaics of the margins, we don't see Rome as it wanted to be remembered by the gods. We see it as it was lived by people, with all its humor, its hustle, and its charming guard dog sincerity. For a moment, the artist's hand becomes a neighbor's wave, a shared joke across the centuries, reminding us that history was not only made in the Senate or on the battlefield, but in the butcher shop, the tavern, and on the doorstep of a home where a dog, even one made of stone, was always on duty. The laughter from a comic mosaic faded as you approached a different kind of threshold. The commission for a temple or a church was not a negotiation with vanity, but a contract with the divine. Here, the artist's role transformed from entertainer to theologian, and every cut of stone carried the weight of eternity. Working on a sacred floor demanded a solemnity that permeated the workshop. The usual chatter stilled, replaced by a focused silence. The master would begin with purification rituals, washing his hands and perhaps offering a small libation to the gods of craft, seeking favor for the work ahead. Precision was no longer just about aesthetics, it was an act of devotion. A tesserae set crooked in a geometric border for a villa was a minor flaw in a temple. It was an offense against the perfect order of the cosmos. The patterns themselves became prayers in stone. In a temple of Mithras, the secretive god popular among Roman soldiers, the iconography was dense with symbolic meaning. The central floor panel might depict Mithras himself in the iconic scene of the Toroctony, slaying the cosmic bull. Each element was a coded part of the mystery religion's teachings. The dog and the snake depicted alongside the bull were not mere animals, but celestial symbols. The artist had to follow the sacred blueprint exactly, his creativity channeled entirely into execution, ensuring every symbolic detail was clear and potent for the initiated who would worship there. The palette was often darker, relying on deep reds, blacks, and whites to convey the solemn, underground atmosphere of the Mithraeum. Contrast this with the floors of an early Christian basilica as the empire's spiritual current shifted. Here, the imagery had to teach a new and growing faith. The artist moved away from realistic portraiture of gods toward symbolic representations that could be understood by all. A common motif was the ichthys, the fish, a secret sign for Christ. You would craft a simple, elegant fish using a few dozen tesserae, its form clear and its meaning profound to those who knew. Other floors featured the Good Shepherd, a gentle figure carrying a lamb, symbolizing care and salvation, or lush, twisting vines representing Christ's words, "I am the vine." The style often became more schematic, less concerned with Roman realism, and more with spiritual clarity. The colors could be brighter, incorporating the gold glass that seemed to hold heavenly light, especially in the apse around the altar. For a Jewish synagogue, the rules were different still. Adhering to the prohibition against graven images, the Mosaic artist turned entirely to the non-figurative. The floor became a tapestry of sacred symbols. You would craft magnificent menorahs with 7 branches, precise shofars, the ram's horn, and lulavs, palm branches for the festival of Sukkot. Interwoven with these were geometric patterns of breathtaking complexity, endless knots and braids symbolizing the infinite nature of God, and sometimes even the zodiac wheel, showing how Jewish life was ordered within the cycles of time and creation. Here, the artist's skill in geometry reached its highest spiritual expression. The pressure in these sacred spaces was of a different magnitude. A mistake was not just a client's complaint, it was a potential sacrilege. The artist worked with a humble awareness that his hands were building a pathway for others to approach the infinite. The floor was no longer a surface for walking, but a foundation for kneeling, a visual hymn meant to lift the eyes and the heart. In adapting his craft from the banquet hall to the basilica, the Mosaic did more than change his subjects. He became a scribe for the soul of an age, translating the empire's deepest hopes and fears into a language of colored stone that even the gods might pause to admire. The sacred geometry of the temple floor offered a promise of eternal order, but in a workshop in Pompeii in the late summer of the year 79, that order was about to shatter. For a Mosaic named Lucius, the morning of August 24th began with the familiar, comforting grit of routine. He was on his knees in the atrium of a wealthy merchant's new villa, finishing a central emblema of Neptune riding a sea chariot. The god's trident was nearly complete. each prong a careful line of dark gray tesserae against the vibrant blue-green sea. Lucius's hammer made its soft, rhythmic tap against the hardy, a sound as regular as his own heartbeat. His world was that square foot of damp mortar and colored stone, the smell of lime, the ache in his lower back. He was thinking of the patron's final payment due that afternoon and the wine he would buy to celebrate. Then the floor moved. It was not a sound at first, but a deep, visceral shudder that traveled up through his knees into his spine. The tray of cobalt blue glass tesserae beside him rattled, a few cubes jumping and skittering across the fresh setting bed. He froze, his hammer poised in midair. A long, low groan seemed to come from the earth itself, a sound of stone grinding against stone deep below the foundations of the house. From another room, he heard a slave girl gasp and the sharp clatter of a dropped bronze bowl. The tremor passed as suddenly as it came, leaving an eerie, ringing silence. Lucius let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. Earth tremors were not uncommon in Campania, a nuisance that sometimes cracked a wall or toppled an amphora. He glanced at his work, relieved to see the emblema was intact. He leaned forward to adjust a single, slightly crooked blue tessera near Neptune's foot. Then the dog began to howl. It was a sound of pure, undiluted terror from the courtyard, a rising wail that cut through the resumed chatter of the household staff. Before Lucius could even look up, the second tremor hit. This was not a shudder, but a violent lurch. The entire villa seemed to jump sideways. A section of the freshly laid mosaic border along the wall buckled with a sickening crunch, a jagged line of white and black tesserae suddenly rising into miniature mountain rain. From upstairs came the crash of falling roof tiles and a woman's scream. Dust bloomed from the ceiling, sifting down in a fine gray snow over his half-finished god of the sea. Panic, sharp and metallic, flooded his mouth. This was not a nuisance. This was something else entirely. He scrambled to his feet, his tools forgotten. Around him, the household erupted into chaos. The steward was shouting contradictory orders. Slaves were running with no clear direction, clutching children or small valuables. Through the open atrium roof, Lucius saw an impossible sight. A monstrous, billowing cloud was unfurling from the mountain to the north, Vesuvius. It was not the gentle white plume they sometimes saw, but a towering, roiling pillar of black and gray, climbing into the sky like a stone pine of nightmares, its top already spreading and darkening the sun. A hot, gritty wind swept through the colonnade, carrying the stench of sulfur like a million rotten eggs. His artist's mind, trained to observe, took in a final, devastating snapshot. His masterpiece, weeks of labor, sat vulnerable. The nucleus was still damp, a perfect target for the falling ash that was already beginning to drift down, delicate and deadly as gray snowflakes. His hammer lay where it had fallen, its wooden handle pointing toward the door. A single, perfect gold glass tessera, meant for the highlight in Neptune's eye, gleamed from a fold in his leather apron, which was draped over a stool. The choice was instant and absolute. He turned and ran, joining the torrent of bodies flooding into the narrow street, away from the sea, away from the mountain, toward a fate he could not comprehend. Behind him, in the suddenly empty villa, the scene was frozen. The mosaic of Neptune remained half-born, his chariot forever incomplete. The tools of creation lay abandoned in the positions of sudden flight. And then, the ash began to fall in earnest, not as flakes, but as a relentless, hot, pumice stone rain, followed by a suffocating pyroclastic surge. It filled the room, settling over everything with a terrible, gentle finality. It buried the hammer, it covered the gold tessera, it filled the grooves between the sea god stones, sealing the artist's last day of work under a thick, gray shroud. In that moment, Lucius's mosaic ceased to be merely a decoration. It became a fossilized heartbeat, a silent scream captured in stone and ash, a perfect, tragic time capsule waiting 17 centuries for a hand to brush away the dust and find a world interrupted in the middle of a hammer's fall. The ash that sealed Pompeii preserved 1,000 silent conversations between a home and its floor. For the mosaic artist, stepping into a new house to survey a potential commission was an exercise in social forensics. Your trained eye scanned not for beauty first, but for clues, reading the existing floors like a map of the owner's wealth, taste, and hidden life. A grand villa with a worn, simple mosaic in the entryway told one story. perhaps an old family clinging to austere Republican values, or a property recently purchased by someone not yet wealthy enough to renovate. But a modest townhouse with a stunning, intricate emblema in its tiny dining room shouted another, a savvy social climber investing every spare coin in the one-room guests would see, a calculated display of cultural ambition. You learn to listen to what the stones said about the person who paid for them. The most telling clue of all was subject matter, a lavish, sprawling scene of Dionysus, the god of wine, ecstasy, and liberation, was rarely just a party theme. For the Roman elite, Dionysus was the center of a mysterious, often secretive cult. His worship promised personal communion with the divine outside the strict control of the state religion. A floor depicting the god surrounded by frenzied maenads and panthers wasn't merely decorative. It was a bold, semi-private declaration. It whispered that the owner might be an initiate into the Dionysian mysteries, a member of a closed group that met for rites the artist himself would never witness. You had to tread carefully, crafting imagery that resonated with the patron's spiritual life without revealing its secrets to every casual visitor. The symbolism was a coded language. A mosaic of Orpheus charming the animals with his lyre could signal a love of poetry and philosophy, a desire for harmony. A scene of the heroic hunter Actaeon, torn apart by his own hounds after seeing the goddess Diana bathing, was a stark warning about the dangers of forbidden knowledge and overreaching ambition. Even the absence of figures spoke volumes. A house filled with sophisticated black and white geometric patterns, complex guilloches and meanders executed with flawless precision, revealed a different priority. This patron valued mathematical order, intellectual rigor, and perhaps a more restrained, classical aesthetic. It suggested a budget directed not at expensive colored marbles from across the sea, but at the highest skill of the local artisan. It was a statement of refined taste over flamboyant wealth, a quiet confidence that needed no mythological fanfare. Your job as the artist was to become a translator of these unspoken desires. The merchant who commissioned a detailed mosaic of ships entering a bustling harbor wasn't just decorating his foyer, he was building a monument to the source of his fortune. The retired soldier who wanted a floor of gleaming military trophies, shields, and laurel wreaths was cementing his identity as a man of Rome, his service forever underfoot. You provided the vocabulary in stone for their personal mythologies. In this way, every mosaic became a collaborative autobiography. The patrons supplied the chapter of their life they wished to emphasize, and you, the artist, found the visual language to make it eternal. You were part confidant, part ghostwriter, embedding their triumphs, their faith, their fears, and their aspirations into the very ground they walked on, creating a historical document far more personal than any carved inscription on a public monument. To walk through a Roman house was to walk through the curated soul of its owner, and your hands held the tesserae that spelled it out one deliberate, colored square at a time. That personal story embedded in the floor was only possible because of the intimate, physical relationship between the artist and his tools. The Mosaic workshop was not a painter's studio filled with brushes and pigments, but a carpenter's bench crossed with a stonemason's yard, each implement an extension of his own hands, worn smooth by daily necessity. At the heart of everything was the hammer and hardy. The hardy was a deceptively simple tool, a stout wedge-shaped iron blade fixed upright into a heavy block of wood. This was the anvil. Against its sharp edge, the artist would place a rough chunk of marble, glass, or stone. In his other hand, he held a small, specialized hammer, its head often rounded on one side for striking and flat on the other for tapping. With a practiced, glancing blow, he would cleave a small cube, a tesserae, from the larger piece. The skill was in the angle and the force, learning to listen to the stone, to understand its grain and weaknesses. A master could produce hundreds of nearly identical cubes in an hour, his hands moving with a rhythm that was both violent and delicate, a controlled shattering that created the building blocks of beauty. Once cut, the tesserae needed to be placed, and for this, the artist reached for the tesserarius. This was not a person, but a crucial tool, a small, flat-bladed trowel, often made of bronze or iron. Its blade was narrow and flexible, perfect for scooping up a small amount of the wet, creamy mortar from a pot and applying it precisely to the spot where a tesserae would go. It could also be used to gently press the stone into its bed, to scrape away excess setting material, or to adjust the angle of a cube already in place. The tesserarius was the pen that wrote in stone, its edge fine enough for the most detailed work on an emblemata. For the larger surfaces, the artist relied on wooden floats. These were flat, rectangular boards with handles, used to spread and smooth the thick layers of the rudis and nucleus, the foundation beds. Applying a perfectly level plane of mortar across an entire room was a feat of strength and precision. You would pour the mix, then drag the float over it in long, sweeping arcs, your arms burning as you worked against the clock before the material began to set. To ensure that perfect plane, you used levels. Roman levels or libri were often simple but effective, a wooden frame with a plumb line. You would place it across the smoothed mortar, watching the string, adjusting the surface by fractions of an inch until it was true. Before any mortar was mixed, the design had to be mapped onto the blank floor. This is where strings and chalk came in. A long cord, stretched taut and dusted with powdered pigment, would be snapped against the prepared ground to create perfectly straight guidelines. For circles and curves, a compass made of a pointed stick and a length of cord would scribe perfect arcs into the surface. These were the first marks, the invisible architecture upon which the visible image would be built. Finally, there were the humble, essential containers. Large earthenware jars held the dry ingredients for mortar, lime, sand, and crushed terracotta. Wooden buckets carried water for mixing, but most personal to the artist were the trays for his tesserae. These were shallow wooden boxes, divided into compartments, each holding a different shade of a color. A master's palette might be a dozen such trays arranged around him, a spectrum of earth and glass at his fingertips, from the deepest volcanic black to the most precious fleck of gold. Over centuries, these tools saw little radical change because their logic was perfect. The hammer, and hardy from a workshop in Roman Britain, would be instantly recognizable to a craftsman in Antioch. What evolved was not the form, but the mastery, the accumulated knowledge in the wrist of the artisan who knew exactly how to strike to get a tesserae 1 millimeter square, or the touch in the hand that could feel, through the wooden float, a dip in the mortar no wider than a coin. These tools were not just objects. They were partners in a silent dialogue between human intention and stubborn material, a conversation that left behind a language of colored stone we are still learning to read. That intimate dialogue between artist and stone was a luxury few could afford. The breathtaking floors we admire today were not just expressions of culture. They were monumental financial investments, the equivalent of commissioning a custom-built supercar or funding a private spacecraft launch. To understand the true scale of a mosaic, we must follow the money, tracing a river of coin from the patron's coffers to the quarry, the workshop, and finally, the floor. The costs broke down into 3 relentless streams: materials, labor, and the master's genius. Materials were the first and most variable expense. Local limestone for white backgrounds was cheap, but the moment your design called for color, the price soared. That vibrant red Rosso Antico marble from Greece did not simply appear. It was quarried by teams of slaves, rough cut into blocks, loaded onto a merchant ship for a perilous journey across the Mediterranean, unloaded at Ostia, transferred to barges up the Tiber, and finally carted to the workshop. Each handoff added cost. Each storm risked a total loss. A single cubic foot of fine-colored marble could cost as much as a skilled artisan earned in a month. Then there was glass. The famous Egyptian blue, a fused concoction of copper, silica, and calcium, was a technological marvel with a price to match. And for the ultimate statement, gold leaf glass tesserae, each one a tiny, handmade treasure, were worth their weight in, well, gold. A patron requesting a large field of gold in a halo or robe was effectively paving their floor with currency. Next came labor, a slow, consuming fire of wages. A complex floor for a large triclinium required a team. The pictor or master designer was the architect, his fee a significant percentage of the total. Beneath him worked several skilled artisans, each commanding a solid daily wage for their precision. Supporting them were apprentices and laborers, hauling mortar, sorting stone, and preparing the setting bed. A team of 5 to 10 men working for 2 or 3 months was not uncommon for a high-end commission. This is not a one-time payment, but a continuous drain, covering not just wages, but food, lodging, and tools for the duration. So what did this mean in real terms? Let's translate. In the 1st century, a skilled legionary might earn about 300 sesterces a year. A modest mosaic for a small shop entrance, using local materials and simple geometric patterns, might cost a few thousand sesterces, perhaps a year's salary for a prosperous merchant. But a grand figurative mosaic for a villa's main room, with imported marbles and a detailed central emblemata, that could easily run to 50,000 sesterces or more. To make that tangible, 50,000 sesterces could buy a comfortable farm with vineyards and olive groves, or about 25,000 modii of wheat, enough to feed a small town for a year. A single floor was worth an entire agricultural estate. This staggering cost explains why mosaics were the ultimate status symbol. They were a liquid, immovable wealth. You could not pawn a mosaic in a financial crisis. It was a declaration that your fortune was so secure, you could literally bury a king's ransom underfoot, turning capital into culture. It also explains the hierarchy of decoration within a home. The most lavish, expensive work was always in the public rooms, the atrium where clients were received, and the triclinium where peers were entertained. Private bedrooms and service areas got simpler, cheaper floors, if they got any at all. Every tesserae was a tiny, colored ledger entry, a permanent record of a patron's reach, ambition, and sheer economic power. The art was beautiful, but its foundation was always, unmistakably, gold. That final payment, the weight of a purse full of coins in your hand, marked the end of your ownership. The scaffolding came down, the last flecks of mortar were scrubbed from the surface, and the patron's furniture was moved back into place. You stood in the doorway, your tools packed, and looked at the floor you had built. It no longer belonged to you. It belonged to the family who would spill wine on it, to the slaves who would scrub it, to the generations of feet that would wear its highest points into soft dimples over centuries. You walked away, and the floor began its own, far longer life. There is a profound and quiet strangeness in this moment. Your entire existence for months, the ache in your back, the dust in your lungs, the focused worry over every tesserae, has been dedicated to creating something you must immediately leave behind. You crafted a permanent piece of the world, yet your own presence in it is fleeting. This is the core paradox of the Mosaic life. You trade your time, your physical self, for an object that will hold your effort long after your name is forgotten. Most of the artists who laid these floors vanished into history without a trace. We know the names of a few patrons from inscriptions, but the hand that actually placed the stones, that mixed the mortar to the perfect consistency, that decided the angle of a shadow, are almost always anonymous. Your greatest achievement was a surface to be walked upon, scuffed by sandals, covered by rugs, appreciated perhaps, but rarely revered as the work of a specific mind and hand. This anonymity wasn't necessarily tragic. It was simply the nature of the craft. You were a link in a chain, a practitioner of a trade, not a solitary genius seeking immortal fame. Your legacy was not a signature, but a standard of workmanship. Would the border you laid stay straight for 100 years? Would the setting bed you mixed resist the damp and the frost? That was your mark on the world, a silent testament to skill embedded in the very durability of the thing itself. It is a humble, powerful form of immortality. To stand in Pompeii today and see a floor still vibrant after volcanic burial, or to walk through the ruins of a British villa and trace the geometric pattern with your toe, is to shake hands with that anonymous artist across the abyss of time. You are connected not by knowing his name, but by witnessing the care in his work, the precision of his line, the choice of his color. In that moment, the artisan's silent bargain with eternity is fulfilled. He is gone, but his discipline remains. He traded the brief span of his days for a permanent sliver of beauty, and in doing so, he joined a conversation that stretches from the ancient world to our own, a dialogue spoken not in words, but in the quiet, enduring language of stone. But beneath that careful, anonymous labor, a darker current sometimes flowed into the mortar. For all their celebration of order and beauty, The Romans lived in a world thick with unseen forces, where envy, malice, and bad luck were as real as the stones underfoot. A beautiful home invited not just admiration, but also the evil eye, a glance of jealousy that could blight fortunes and health. So the Mosaic became more than a decorator, he became a protector, weaving invisible shields into his art. These were the apotropaic symbols, designs meant to avert evil. You would often find them not in the central panel, but in the borders, a first line of defense at the room's edge. A common motif was the simple, spiraling labyrinth. To step over this pattern was symbolically to confuse and trap any malevolent spirit trying to enter. Another was the Gorgonaeon, the terrifying face of the Gorgon Medusa, with her serpent hair and wide, petrifying stare. By placing this fearsome visage in the floor, the artist turned her power outward, using her gaze to freeze evil in its tracks before it crossed the threshold. Even the repeating meander, or Greek key pattern, was more than geometry. Its endless, unbroken path symbolized a protective barrier that negative energy could not penetrate. The artist crafted these with the same care as a portrait, knowing their function was as vital as their form, yet sometimes the threat was believed to come not from outside, but from within the very process of creation. The intense, collaborative labor was a pressure cooker for grievances. A worker cheated of his promised bonus, an apprentice subjected to brutal treatment, a rival workshop sabotaging a commission, all could fester into a desire for revenge. And in a world that took the supernatural seriously, revenge could be baked into the floor itself. There are rare, chilling accounts, more folklore than verified history, of disgruntled workers placing intentional errors or hidden curses within the Mosaic. The idea was to lay a trap in plain sight. An artisan might deliberately set a single tesserae upside down, its rough, unfinished side facing up amidst a sea of smooth, polished surfaces. This wasn't a mistake, it was a seed of imperfection, a deliberate flaw meant to introduce a crack in the household's luck, a slow leak of misfortune that would seep out over years. More sinister still was the concept of burying a curse within the layers. Before the final setting bed was poured, a worker might secretly place a small, rolled lead tablet into the foundation rubble. On this tablet, scratched in crude letters, would be a plea to the chthonic gods of the underworld, binding a spirit to haunt the home or bring ruin to its owner. The Mosaic, then, became not a blessing, but a beautiful lid sealing a poison pill into the very bones of the house. While few such tablets have been concretely found in Mosaic foundations, the practice of lead curse tablets, or depictions, was widespread in Roman life, slipped into graves, tossed into wells, or nailed to temple walls. It is a short, dark step to imagine one placed under a floor, where it would lie forever, activated by every footstep above. This taps into the deepest layer of the ancient mystery, the fear that beauty itself could be a vessel for malice, that the craftsman's hand, if wronged, could switch from creating harmony to engineering a slow, silent ruin. The perfect floor you walked upon might not just display myth. It might be a silent story of grievance and supernatural vengeance waiting in the dark, just beneath the glittering surface. The shimmering gold and imported marbles of the High Empire began to fade, not with a bang, but with a slow, quiet dimming, as the political and economic pillars of the Western Roman Empire crumbled in the 4th and 5th centuries. The Mosaic world contracted. The great trade routes that brought Egyptian glass and Greek marble became dangerous, then impossible. The wealthy senatorial class, the traditional patrons of grand villa floors, saw their fortunes stripped away by invasion, taxation, and a collapsing administration. The artist, ever an adapter, now faced his greatest challenge: how to practice his craft when the world that demanded it was disappearing. The first casualty was complexity. The exquisitely detailed opus vermiculatum, the worm-like work used for delicate shading and realistic faces, became a luxury of the past. Workshops could no longer afford the time or the specialized skill to set thousands of minute tesserae for a single portrait. Instead, styles simplified dramatically. Figures became more schematic, drawn with thicker, bolder outlines in dark stone, their forms flatter and less naturalistic. The subtle play of light and shadow gave way to a clearer, more graphic storytelling. as if the artist was distilling the image down to its most essential, recognizable elements. This wasn't a decline in skill, but a shift in priority, from breathtaking realism to enduring clarity in an age of growing uncertainty. The palette itself told a story of a shrinking world. Gone were the vibrant, expensive imports. The Mosaics turned inward to local materials. In a villa in Roman Britain, the floor that might once have boasted African yellow and Egyptian blue was now composed entirely of local stone, river pebbles, and even recycled red tile from older, demolished buildings. The colors became earthier, dominated by the whites, grays, and browns of the immediate landscape. A green might come from a local slate rather than precious verd antico. This resourcefulness was born of necessity, but it created a new, more grounded aesthetic, a art tied directly to the soil on which it stood. The grand mythological narratives of pagan Rome, the tales of Jupiter, Venus, and Hercules, also began to vanish from domestic floors. They were not banned overnight, but they lost their cultural urgency. The new patron with both the means and the motive to commission floors was the Christian Church. And the Church demanded a new visual language. The Mosaics, who once rendered the lustful adventures of the gods, now learned to depict the Lamb of God, the Good Shepherd, and the Kairos symbol. The artistic principles remained, the setting of tesserae into mortar, but the stories transformed. The focus shifted from the heroic individual to the community of faith, from tales of power and passion to symbols of sacrifice, resurrection, and divine order. This adaptation is profoundly poignant. In regions like Britain and Northern Gaul, the classical Mosaic tradition didn't end with a dramatic collapse. It simply faded away like a lamp running out of oil. Workshops closed as their patrons fled or grew poor. The knowledge of complex mortar recipes and intricate cutting techniques passed down for generations was slowly forgotten. In some places, the craft survived only in the most rudimentary form, geometric patterns in 2 or 3 colors for the simplest of churches. The artist who once served a senator now served a bishop, and then, in some places, served no one at all. The floor of a villa, left half-finished during a time of crisis, might be the last mosaic ever laid in that province, its incomplete border a silent marker of the end of an era. This was not a failure of art, but its poignant testament. The changing mosaic styles are a direct reflection, a mirror held up to a society in transition. They show us an artist persevering, using what he had, telling the new stories of a new power, even as the old world dissolved around him. The stones grew coarser, the lines simpler, the gods replaced by a single god, but the human impulse to make meaning, to leave a beautiful, lasting mark on the ground beneath our feet, stubbornly remained. It was a quieter, humbler eternity, but an eternity nonetheless, built one local, imperfect stone at a time. That quiet, humble eternity built from local stone never truly ended. It simply slept, waiting for new hands to rediscover its language. To understand the full arc of this story, we need to step out of the ancient workshop and into a modern studio, where the dust is still the same, and the fundamental conversation between hand, hammer, and stone continues with a startling intimacy. If we could sit down with a contemporary mosaic artist, what would they tell us about this timeless craft? The first thing they would likely show you is their hammer and hardy. The tool is almost identical to its Roman ancestor, a heavy iron blade set in a wooden block. The modern artist picks up a rough piece of marble, places it against the edge, and with a precise, glancing tap from a small hammer, cleaves a perfect tesserae. The sound is exactly the same, a sharp, clean tink that would be instantly familiar to Lucius in Pompeii. They might explain that while electric tile cutters exist for certain materials, for the true depth and character of stone, for that unique, faceted edge that catches light, nothing replaces the hand-cut tesserae. The technique is not just practical, it's a philosophical choice. It connects them directly to the rhythm of the craft, accepting the slight variations, the individuality of each piece, which builds the life and shimmer into the final work. The ancient Mosaics sorted his colors into wooden trays. The modern artist uses plastic bins, but the principle is identical, a spectrum of earth and glass arranged by hue and value, a painter's palette rendered in solid form. And the setting bed, while modern adhesives like thin set mortar are chemically different from Roman lime mortar, The process of embedding each piece into a permanent matrix is fundamentally unchanged. The artist still spreads the bed, still works section by section before it cures, still uses the same small trowels to adjust and press each stone home. The scale of time might be the most profound shared challenge. A contemporary artist working on a large public installation faces the same marathon as the Roman crew in a villa triclinium. It is a physical, meditative, and deeply patient process. You spend 8 hours on your knees, and you might cover only a few square feet with complex work. Your back aches, your fingers grow rough, and your world shrinks to the small patch in front of you. There is no shortcut for placing 10,000 individual pieces by hand. The modern artist understands, in their bones, the Roman craftsman's bargain, trading days of their life for a permanent piece of the world, but the connection goes deeper than technique into the very psychology of creation. A modern mosaicist will speak of getting lost in the flow, in the puzzle of color and shape, in the satisfaction of seeing a fragmented vision slowly coalesce into a unified whole. This is the same joy the Roman artisan must have felt when the scattered tesserae resolved into the powerful gaze of a god, or the graceful arc of a dolphin. It is the joy of making order from chaos, one small, deliberate decision at a time. The drive is not to replicate the past, but to participate in the same essential human act. Today's artists might use recycled glass, smalti from Italy, or stones collected from a local beach, telling stories of ecology, personal memory, or abstract emotion. Yet the core impulse mirrors the Romans' desire to encode meaning, to leave a durable mark, to communicate something vital through the arrangement of colored fragments. When you look at a modern mosaic, you are seeing the continuation of a conversation that began on a dusty floor 2,000 years ago. It is a testament to a craft so fundamentally human, so perfectly marrying hand, material, and time, that its basic grammar could survive the fall of empires and the birth of new worlds. The tools are familiar, the patience is the same, and the quiet triumph of setting the final tesserae, of stepping back to see the completed picture, is a feeling that has never and will never grow old. The anonymous artist walks away, but the floor remains, a testament to a life spent in pursuit of permanence. We have walked a mile in his worn sandals, from the first gritty morning grinding pigment to the final, silent appraisal of a finished masterpiece. We have felt the discipline of the workshop, the weight of exotic stones in our hands, and the immense pressure of a patron's gaze. We have seen that this was never just a trade, it was a complex life of art, commerce, and quiet philosophy. These men, and they were almost always men, possessed a rare fusion of skills. They were geologists, knowing the heart of a stone by its fracture. They were chemists, mixing the secret recipes for mortar that would hold for millennia. They were mathematicians, plotting perfect geometries that spoke of cosmic order. They were psychologists, navigating the egos and whims of the wealthy. And they were storytellers, the anonymous cinematographers of the ancient world. With thousands of tiny, colored fragments, they framed the grand narratives of their age right underfoot. They captured the wrath of gods and the vanity of emperors, the playful bark of a house dog, and the silent power of a sacred symbol. Every floor was a choice, a decision about what story was worth preserving in the most durable medium they knew. So the next time you see an image of a Roman mosaic, whether it is the fierce Alexander in battle or a simple geometric border from a country villa, look closer. See past the image to the hand, see the millions of deliberate decisions, the calloused fingers, the days of dust and ache, and the profound, humble bargain with time. These artists traded the brief candle of their own lives for a sliver of eternity, and in doing so, they gave us a window into their world unlike any other. They did not build the aqueducts or lead the legions, but they built the visual soul of Rome, one tiny, perfect tesserae at a time. If this journey into their world resonated with you, let us know. Which scene would you have commissioned for your own villa floor? Share your thoughts below. And if you crave more of these deep dives into the hidden lives of the ancient world, be sure to subscribe. The past is a mosaic itself, and we have only just begun to piece it together.